Just two comments before we start on today's topic. Just sort of reviewing things we have been doing or upcoming. David Irving, as you probably saw, got jailed for 3 years for his Holocaust denial in Austria, and I wrote an op-ed piece that appeared in the LA Times on Wednesday, essentially defending David Irving, who I've spent the last 12 years debunking. And there are certain principles, I think, that go above just the straight debunking, and that is freedom of speech. So I'll just read the last paragraph here. We have to defend Irving in order to defend ourselves. Once the laws are in place to jail dissenters of Holocaust history, what's to stop such laws from being applied to dissenters of religious or political histories, or to skepticism of any sort that deviates from the accepted canon? Since I have a magazine called Skeptic, I thought should be concerned about these things. You never know. No one should be required to facilitate the expression of Holocaust denial. For example, these guys have sent ads to us. They want to buy an ad in Skeptic. I said, no thanks. That's not free speech. You're free to run ads or not, help them or not. We're talking about government intervention. As what Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis called the silence coerced by law, the argument of force in its worst form. The point was poignantly made in Robert Bolt's play A Man for All Seasons, in which William Roper and Sir Thomas More debate the relative balance between evil and freedom. So Roper says, so now you would give the devil benefit of law? And More says, yes. What would you do? Cut a great road through the law to get after the devil? And Roper says, I'd cut down every law in England to do that. And More says, oh, and when the law was down and the devil turned round on you, where would you hide? Yes, I'd give the devil the benefit of law for my own safety's sake. So call David Irving a devil if you want. The principle of free speech says you can. But we have to give the devil his due to protect ourselves. Anyway, that's my statement on that. So by way of introduction for Dan Dennett today, since we're dealing with a deep form and an emotionally loaded form of pattern-seeking behavior, humans are pattern-seeking animals, we tend to see patterns. They're fun patterns like the face on Mars from the Viking mission, and of course this is a low-resolution, sort of low-resolution image, a high-grained, a higher resolution image from 2001. If you squint, you can still see the face pop up. Actually, I'm going to make this a little bit larger by backing this up just a tiny bit, and that's a good idea. How's that? Okay, I'm going to bring this back just a little bit, and let's see. How's that? Okay, close your left eye, close your right. Okay, if you do squint, you can see the face pops back out again. And what you're doing by squinting is you're reducing the quality of the data. You're bringing it back to the old image. Yeah, that probably helps a little bit there. So when the patterns are obvious, you can see the happy face on Mars. There he is there. If astronomers were frogs, they'd see images such as Kermit the Frog. We're programmed by evolution to see faces. We're programmed to see things that are important to us. We're not frogs, nor are we elephants. But things that have religious intonations. There's Our Lady of Guadalupe and Our Lady of Watsonville. Tree bark is terrific for these kinds of pattern-seeking behaviors because they're splotchy and you can find, like in clouds, whatever you're looking for. The Virgin Mary in Sao Paulo on the side of a glass window. Here's the cheese sandwich, the Virgin Mary on a cheese sandwich, which I actually got to hold the cheese sandwich. The Virgin Mary was, you can see it there. A casino purchased the cheese sandwich for $28,500 on eBay, where she now resides in a casino in Las Vegas. You can see somebody took a bite out of her before the... And I was trying to think, what pattern does this really look like? The iconography of the Virgin Mary through the Middle Ages? Well, not really. More like Jane Russell. And then the Virgin Mary in the Clearwater, Florida on the side of a building. Believers there to be healed at this icon. We went there on Good Friday a couple of years ago. Dawkins, myself, and the amazing Randy, just to give you perspective, it's a 3-story image there. Candles all over the place, worshipers. There's so much wax, candle wax, on the pavement of the parking lot, they had to put that granulated stuff they use in auto shops to soak up the grease. It turns out wherever there is a sprinkler system and a palm tree, there is an image on a window. Some of them are just these sort of random, but sort of kind of like that image. But there's one on the backside that looks just like the Virgin Mary that they started to wipe off, because I guess you can only have one miracle per building. But you can see the sprinkler here. You can see that where they cut the palm tree off there. You can see that where it used to be there, right? So we always have to ask, what's more likely, this explanation or that? Is it really a miracle of Mary, or is it more of a miracle of Marge? And then, as a final example of this, auditory patterns pop out, particularly if they have religious meaning to them. Here is the most famous rock song of all time, usually rated as the top rock song of all time. I will actually have to use this microphone this way.
If there's a button in your hedgerow, don't be alarmed there. It's just a sprinkling for the May Queen. Yes, there are 2 paths you can go by, but in the long run, there's still time to change the road you're on.
Okay, so that's forward. I'm not sure what it means, but there's a web page, reversespeech.com, that has all these supposedly hidden messages embedded in the songs if you play them backwards. Not just songs, it's speeches and so on. But this is the most famous example where you can allegedly, when you play this backwards, you can hear these, well, religious type words. And so, but I'm going to play it first for you without the words on the screen. See what you can hear. Did you get it? What'd you hear? Hey, Satan? Anything else? What? 666? Sexy. Oh, that's good, yeah. See, these things are like an ink blot. It reflects what you're thinking about. Seriously. And so here it is with the words. And then now you will hear, believe me, the Led Zeppelin did not lay down this track. This is just random noise. But when you see what it actually is supposed to say, it pops right out. Okay. That's too much. So this is a cognitive priming mechanism. When I tell you what to hear or look for, then you see it, particularly when the data is grainy. You can't quite make out what's going on. Then, in other words, it's a data theory thing. The theory tells you what the data says, particularly when the data are kind of fuzzy, which is what when I met Al Gore, I said, this is the problem you have of selling this whole global warming business. People that have a non-global warming theory are not going to see the data in the same way. It's a big problem in science. Anyway, I'll end and then introduce Dan with this nice little fun, positive example of science education. That is, what can we do about all these kinds of little problems? And This has to do with a nice little thing that Simon Singh did. Simon Singh is a British particle physicist who essentially stopped doing research to do science education. He writes popular books like The Big Bang and a book on Fermat's theorem. He has a television series in the UK on science, Theater of Science it's called. Anyway, Simon writes op-ed pieces about different things having to do with science and correcting scientific mistakes. And in England, there's a popular singer named Katie Melua, who's sort of the Norah Jones of the UK. She's had several #1 hits, and they have to do with, of course, love and things like that. And one of her most popular song is a song called 9 Million Bicycles. It has to do with, how many bicycles there are in Beijing, and I love you even more than that, and that sort of thing. And here's the passage that Simon wrote about. Okay, 1 second here. Sorry, hang on.
Light years from the edge, that's a guess. No one can ever say it's true, but I know that I will always be with you.
Okay, so Simon writes in this op-ed piece in The Guardian that, well, it's not 12 billion light years, it's 13.7 billion light years. And it's not a guess. I mean, we really know. And finally, after decades, we know within a well-defined range of error bars exactly how old the universe is. And it's not. We've been working on this for a long time, and it's not that no one can ever say it's true. We can say not true with a capital T, but the way science works is provisionally true, and we're getting closer to the truth. So he goes on and on about this, and this gets published. And about a week later, he gets a call from Katie, who says, "I'm so embarrassed. I was in the astronomy club. I should have known better." So bless her, she recut the song.
We are 13.7 billion light years from the edge of the observable universe. That's a good estimate with well-defined error bars. And with the available information, I predict that I will always be with you.
Yeah, let me play it again here. Let's see.
We are 13.7 billion light years from the edge of the observable universe. That's a good estimate with well-defined error bars. And with the available information, I predict that I will always be with you.
How's that for a little triumph of science education? And okay, 1 second here. Yeah. That's very good. Okay, for the real reason you're here. All this, of course, is a lead up to this. This is a problem of patterns that have deep religious and emotional commitment to them. And Dan Dennett is one of the great minds of our time. I was going to say 20th century, but hey, it's 21st century now, so he's still with us. He's probably the philosopher with the most training in science and background in science, or at least the application of science to his work, Consciousness Explained, Darwin's Dangerous Idea. His book he lectured for us 2 years ago, Freedom Evolves. Several books on consciousness, Sweet Dreams, and Brainstorms about the problems of studying consciousness. And his latest book, Breaking the Spell, that you see on the screen there, is his philosophical and scientific approach to the study of religion as a natural phenomenon. Dan is a philosopher at Tufts University. I had the privilege of spending a week with him on a boat in the Galapagos, and it was a great treat to see him sitting there on the beach building a sandcastle. I'm thinking, we got to get a picture of this. Here's one of the great philosophers of all time, and he's building sandcastles on the beach. And in fact, he's building sandcastles of knowledge and wisdom for us all. Dan Dennett.
Thank you very much. I was at the same conference in Monterey with Michael, and at the end of this conference, which is very intense and very serious, there's a fellow who always does a sort of a comedic rehash of all the things that we've just heard. And one of the things that happened in the session with Michael, and I was in the same session, is first Rick Warren, Pastor Rick Warren, the author of Purpose-Driven Life, he gave a talk, and then I gave a talk sort of deconstructing his book, doing the reverse engineering of his religious design. And it led to quite an interesting sort of confrontation. It wasn't that confrontational. Warren walked out. He wouldn't. And then the comedian at the end, picking up on Michael's, Michael presented the same things that you just heard, claimed to have found a song where what was it? It was reading Rick Warren backwards, and it says, Dan Dennett is Satan, Dan Dennett is Satan. It was pretty funny. I hope. So after 9/11, I was thinking about the huge role that religion plays in our lives and trying to figure out where I thought it was going. And I thought, I don't know, I have any idea. I have no idea what's going to happen to religion in the 21st century, and I think that's pretty scary. And I looked around, and it seemed to me nobody else did either. And I thought, well, why not? One of the reasons is that we're not studying religion with the same intensity that we're studying the economy, fossil fuels, global warming, all the other big phenomena, the big problematic phenomena in the world, and we should. And so the title of my book really is about, let me see if I can go back to it here. Yeah. The spell I want to break is the spell which says, thou shalt not study religion objectively, scientifically. I think whatever you want to happen to religion, your best chances of getting what you want is to understand the phenomena better so that you can fix it or destroy it or change it. Whatever you want to do, it pays as always to gather more scientific knowledge of it. I just want to dramatize how little we know about what's going to happen to religion by giving you 5 scenarios. There's others we could have chosen. These are 5 scenarios. One of them might be true. Just think about it. See which one you think might be true. Some people think that, you know, the Enlightenment is over and religion is sweeping the planet, and it's going to continue sweeping the planet until one religion goes to fixation. Now, which religion is that going to be? It's not clear. It might be Christianity, it might be Islam, and it might happen in a few weeks or months, or it might happen in a few years. This is the current rough breakdown of religions around the world. And notice that no matter what religion you are, if you are one, in this audience, I don't suppose there are probably that many that do have a religion, but whatever religion you have, it's the minority. So that more people don't want it to sweep to fixation than want it to sweep to fixation. You might reflect on what that means about the future of this planet. But of course, that's just one scenario. This is not working as well as it should. Another one is that religion is in its death throes. Contrary to what others have said, what we're seeing now are the paroxysms, the dying gasps of religion. And maybe in the lifetime of your own grandchildren, the Vatican City will become the European Museum of Roman Catholicism. and Mecca will become Disney's Magic Kingdom of Allah. Seems a little unlikely, I know. But bear in mind that the Hagia Sophia, it started off as a church, then it became a mosque, and today it's a museum. It's worth remembering. So, but there's 2 hypotheses. Here's another one. Maybe religions are going to change. They're going to transform themselves into sort of creedless moral teams with pageantry, with songs, with traditions, with colors, and they may specialize in one moral effort or another, but, you know, leaving out the creeds. Maybe it'll all be just sort of evolving pageantry. That's another prospect. Might happen. Who knows? Another possibility might be that religion will simply sink into the background. It will diminish in prestige and visibility, rather like smoking. And that although right now it's very high status to be very religious, it maybe the religious people will be sort of like the people huddled out in the rain outside buildings, you know, having their cigarettes. Seems unlikely, but then there's another prospect to consider. Then, of course, there's one more prospect to consider, and that is Judgment Day arrives. Now, oddly enough, or not so oddly, according to Newsweek magazine, the majority of Americans believe this one. 57%, according to a recent poll. It's worth reflecting on that. Now, with all those different hypotheses, the important thing to remember is all but one of them at most is wildly wrong, and nobody knows which one's right. Nobody. I don't know, and you don't know. Nobody knows. That's why we really should study religion as intensively as we can to try to get a better handle on this, because there may be something we'll want to do to try to steer the phenomena in the future. Now, consider this wonderful dairy cow. What a magnificent beast this is. Who designed it? Well, some people say God designed it. But of course, the dairy cow is an interesting, as a domesticated animal, it's an interesting amalgam of design processes. For many millions of years, this is its ancestor, the aurochs. It was a wild animal, and it was designed by the process of natural selection, evolution by natural selection, without any help from any human beings. Then it became domesticated, and at first there was no intention to redesign it so much, but just the favoring of individuals in the herd gradually led to the redesign of the animal. And then eventually it became methodically redesigned by animal breeders, as Darwin is wonderful on the transition between methodical design and what he calls unconscious selection, methodical selection and unconscious selection. And eventually, of course, you get an animal which really has been intelligently designed and redesigned. There's been a lot of effort put into trying to reverse engineer the dairy cow and figure out how the parts work and how to make the parts work better. Now, I use that as an analogy because what I'm arguing in my book is the same thing's true of religion. Religions are designed things, and part of their design is unconscious natural selection, not involving human beings at all, really. Part of it is unconscious redesign by human beings, and then there's part of it that's deliberate design by human beings. And that's the story that I want to sketch out for you. That's one of the main themes that runs through my book. In other words, what we're going to do here is recognize that religions are brilliantly designed products. Now, let me pause for a moment, because a lot of people, they hear about my book, they start reading about it, and they say, Dennett wants to destroy religions. And that is not true. I don't know what I think should happen to religion, but I do recognize that they are some of the most brilliantly designed social institutions on the planet. They've been around for thousands of years. We jolly well should understand what makes them tick. We should look under the hood and find out what makes them tick, because maybe we want to use them for something really important. Don't destroy all that wonderful design just because you don't like it. Let's understand it first. So we want to understand their evolutionary history. What we want to do is reverse engineer religions. Now, if Martian scientists came to Earth, they would be mightily impressed with some of the things they saw on this planet. I'm going to show you a few pictures to show you what might attract the attention of Martian scientists. Why do I talk about Martian scientists? Because it helps to make the familiar strange. We're so used to having religion all around us that we tend not to notice what's bizarre or striking about it. It helps if you can sort of adopt a Martian perspective. And I think one of the things that would impress the Martians when they came to our planet would be this. Now, who knows what this is? One person here knows, and I want to thank him from the bottom of my heart, because he sent me this picture. What is it? I've asked people, say, so is it a whale? Is it bacteria in a culture dish? No? No, it's not the Hindenburg. This is what it is. If I can get my thing to work. This is approximately 1 million human beings gathering on the banks of the Ganges in 2001. Probably the largest gathering of human beings in one place ever, as seen from a satellite. Wow. That would have certainly attract the Martians' attention. So would this smaller crowd, or this smaller crowd. My goodness, what an elaborate, expensive, energetic, what a profligate expenditure these events manifest. What on earth can explain them? Among the questions that they would ask is, how does this originate? What's it for? How does it perpetuate itself? Here's another thing that might puzzle the biologist. It might puzzle you. Suppose you go out in the meadow and you see a blade of grass and you see an ant climbing up the blade of grass. Climbs and climbs and climbs, and it falls, and it climbs and it falls, and it climbs and it falls. Like Sisyphus rolling his rock. It's just over and over again till he reaches the very top. You think, what's in it for this ant? Why is this ant doing this? What benefit accrues to the ant from climbing up the blade of grass? Is it searching for food? Is it showing off to potential mates? Is it trying to find its way home? What is it doing, and what benefit accrues to it? And the answer is no benefit accrues to the ant at all. Well then, what is this behavior then? Is it just a fluke? And the answer is yes, it's just a fluke. It's a lancet fluke. Dicrocelium dendriticum, it's a small parasitic brain worm that has crawled into the ant's brain because in order to continue its life cycle, it has to get into the belly of a sheep or a cow. And it has a higher probability of getting into the belly of a sheep or cow if it gets the ant to drive up to the top of the blade of grass. You know, salmon, you know, they work so hard to get upstream to lay their eggs. And Dicrocelium dendriticum just commandeers a passing ant and treats it like an all-terrain vehicle, drives it up to the top of the... Yeah. That's amazing. I'm going to give you another example. This is Toxoplasma gondii, and it is a parasite of mice. And it has to get into the belly of a cat to continue its life cycle. Now, I wonder what it does. How does it get from the mouse to the cat? It turns the mouse into Mighty Mouse. It makes the mouse bold, fearless. It runs right out into the open, improving its chances of getting into a belly of a cat. There are many other examples. I'm now collecting quite a bunch of them. The people that work in parasitology. And this host manipulation is quite a wonderful and a gory and interesting thing. Intelligent design, right? You do have to wonder about an intelligent designer that would pull such cruel tricks. What we have here is a hijacker, a parasite that infects the brain and induces suicidal behavior on behalf of a cause other than one's own genetic fitness. Gosh, that's scary. Does it ever happen to us? Well, I'd like to remind you that Islam means submission. It's the Arabic word for submission. Surrender of self-interest to the will of Allah. But it's not just Islam, it's Christianity too. This is a parchment page that I found in a bookstall in Paris over 50 years ago. It's about 1540. And the Latin says, Semen est verbum Dei sator autem Christus. It's nice. The scribe has put the Greek letters chi rho and then gone on in Latin, and not knowing that the rho was an R, put in an extra R. So that's actually chi rho R-I-S is a slight misspelling of the word Christus. So what does this mean? It means the word of God is a seed, and the sower of the seed is Christ. And all who hear him will get eternal life. Now you might say that's not quite the same idea as the Islam surrender, but it is for many Christians, and in fact Rick Warren's book has some amazing quotes in it where he says, surrender is the heart of worship. Surrender. And don't, there's another passage here, the heart of worship is surrender, and then get this one. Surrendered people obey God's word even if it doesn't make sense. So it's actually a very common idea in religions. These are ideas to die for. Now, there's many of them. Islam is one. Christianity is certainly another. Communism, many people in the last century certainly died and killed for communism or for democracy. We probably all have friends or family members who gave their lives for democracy or justice or freedom. This is an amazing fact about our species. I live in Massachusetts, northern Massachusetts, and right over the border, this is what the license plates say. Live free or die. Now, lovely patriotic motto. And notice that the moose cannot entertain that thought. We're the only species that has sort of room in its head for an idea like this. We're the only species that does anything like this. And this is a remarkable fact. It's visible to biology. And it's explicable by biology, too. As I look out, I see a lot of people my age or even older. A lot of you are grandparents. Many grandparents here? Yeah, sure. It's great having grandchildren. How many of you think that the most important thing in your life is having more grandchildren than your next door neighbor? No, but we're the only species that has that attitude. We're the only species that can have something for our summum bonum other than the genetic imperative. How is that possible? Where did we find the elbow room? Where did we find the leverage to break out of that pattern and transcend our genetic imperative and come to think of other things as even more important than having more offspring? And the answer is obvious. It's culture. It's having ideas to die for. How did that happen? It's ideas, not worms, that hijack our brains. And these are ideas that replicate in competition with each other. They're what Richard Dawkins calls memes. That's, of course, from his book, The Selfish Gene. Memes, according to Dawkins, are analogous to genes. They are the replicating informational items. And we can consider their fitness. So we have selfish memes in addition to selfish genes. And of course, as Michael says, we understand that term selfish is shorthand for something which is actually quite precise. These are things that are designed to foster their own replication in greater numbers than the competition. Dawkins famously compares memes to viruses, which are sort of naked genes. There's sort of a bit of DNA or RNA with a protein overcoat. Or as I like to say, a virus is a string of nucleic acid with attitude. That's all. What I mean, attitude is, it doesn't carry its own copying machinery with it. It simply has something about the way it's designed that has the effect, when it's in the right circumstances, of provoking its own self-replication, utilizing commandeering the copying machinery of a cell. And Dawkins' brilliant insight is, yeah, and ideas do that too. Once culture exists, once language exists, once there are items, replicating items like words, then they compete for space in brains. And some compete better than others and get themselves copied. First in your own brain. Every time you say that over and over and over, that's another generation. If you have an obsessive idea running through your head, each instance of it is another generation. That idea is making more copies in your own brain. And then sometimes maybe it'll get you to say it to somebody else, and then it'll start making copies in that brain and so forth. And the idea will spread. That's the fundamental idea. Here's a theologian writing, if survival of the fittest has any validity as a slogan, then the Bible seems a fair candidate for the accolade of the fittest of texts. Think of all those Gideon Bibles. Think of all the Bibles in all the different languages of the world that have been translated. I think probably Piper is right. It's probably the fittest text in the world, even fitter than Rick Warren's Purpose-Driven Life, which has sold 30 million copies. Notice it's important that this is fitness in the precise, hard-bitten evolutionary biology sense of making more offspring. That's all. That's all fitness means in this context. Now, human culture which is the medium in which this competition goes on, is itself one of the fruits on the tree of life. Let's look for a minute at the tree of life. This is a nice diagram from Science 97. It doesn't look much like a tree from here, but that's because this is a bird's eye view of the tree. You're looking down on the top, and right there in the center, we have the root of the tree. That's where Luca is. Oh, what's happened with my rest of my slides? That's very strange. It doesn't work on your machine, Michael. Yeah, too bad. Okay. In that slide, there were three. Let me go back a few slides. Remind me to run through my slides on the machine next time I do it. You see the three branches of life, the archaea, the bacteria, and the eukarya. Some people would add the viruses now, by the way, as a fourth category. Not quite alive, but sort of alive. And here on the eukarya, we have three species listed out here on the end. It's Coprinus, Homo, and Zea. That's Homo, of course, is us. And the artist has flanked us with two of our nearest relatives on the tree of life. Coprinus, that is to say mushrooms, and Zea, that is to say corn, are cousins, near cousins on the tree of life. But among those species, among the eukarya, there's one species, ours, that has culture in a big way, but there's other species, such as beavers, that make dams, and their dams are artifacts made by mammals, and the Hoover Dam is also an artifact made by a mammal. And there's cultural evolution involved in both cases. But of course, in many ways, the processes are very different. A spider web is an artifact made by an animal, and the World Wide Web, or a power grid, is another artifact made by an animal. And they can be reverse engineered and studied in the same spirit, and brought together under one heading, which is what we need to do. On the left, we see a wonderful artifact made by a bird. It's a bird's nest. On the right, we see an ode to a nightingale. We see a first draft. Same sort of things in some ways. Now, obviously, an ode to a nightingale has not been copied from an earlier ode to a nightingale. That would be plagiarism. But, by the way, when I'm teaching evolutionary theory, I often tell my students that one way of getting at the principle of natural selection is it's the principle of plagiarism. Any design that's worth copying, because R&D is expensive, will be copied and copied and copied and then slightly revised and slightly revised. What plagiarists appreciate is the fundamental underlying insight of Darwinism, namely that design is expensive. But if you can save it and then copy it, then it saves you all that design work, and then you can build on the design work. You don't have to keep reinventing the wheel. That's how evolution works. Even human culture gets underway without any insightful design to prime the pump. Now, I think we're running a little late, so I'm going to rush through a bit of this. In the book, I have a sketch of a theory of the evolution of religion from pre-religion, from our hominid ancestors up through to the present day. And the point of that sketch is not this is the truth, but this is what a theory of religion would look like. Because some people just say, I can't imagine having a scientific theory of religion. I can't imagine how you could get the purchase and have a scientific theory of religion. Well, now they can imagine, because I've given them a sketch of a theory. It's probably not right. Large parts of it, I'm sure, are right. Large parts of it, I'm pretty sure, are wrong. I just don't know which. My point is to do what scientists do. You put out a theory and then say, fix it. Correct it, refute it, replace it with a better theory. That's fine. And at least we know what a theory would be. Now, it begins with something that we share with many of our vertebrate cousins, and pretty much all mammals, I guess. And that's what Justin Barrett calls a HAD, or hyperactive agent detection device. If, well, you don't have snow here, but something that we have back in the East is your dog is sort of snoozing on the hearth, and some snow falls off the roof, and lands with a thud outside, and the dog is up in a shot and looking around. Grrr. That's the dog's had doing a false alarm. Who's there? Who's there? What do you want? It's supposing there's an agent, something to confront as an agent out there, and it's on hair trigger in all of us for a very good evolutionary reason. In a dog, or a dolphin, or a wolf, or a bear, this orientation response pretty well evaporates after a few seconds. False alarm, back to sleep. But in us, with our echoic brains, with our imaginations, it builds, and it builds, and it repeats. And what started off as just a wild speculation, who's there, who's there? Oh my gosh, did that tree say something? Was it talking? Is that a talking tree? Oh my God, a talking tree. It's a talking tree. Oh my God, a talking tree. A talking tree. Oh my God. Hey, Joe, there's a talking tree. Oh, what a talking tree. And round it goes. And pretty soon, at least a few of you think, gosh, maybe there's a supernatural talking tree out in the woods. Now, most of these ideas are pretty stupid, actually. Well, not surprisingly. They're sort of amplified random noise. But a few of them are more memorable, that is to say, more unforgettable than others. Those are the ones that keep making copies in your brains. But your brains are a limited resource, so pretty soon there's competition, and only the most vivid and memorable and grabby of these ideas is going to hang in there in competition. And what do we find? We find in every tribal culture, we find a population of invisible supernatural agents of all kinds. These are the ones that these people believe in. And how long have they believed in them? Who knows? It's very hard to say. It's an oral culture. Now, that's not religion, that's superstition. But those are the wild ancestors of the organized religions of today. A population of imps, goblins, fairies, gods, leprechauns. They compete for rehearsal space, and some of them win. And what are the winners for? They're for occupying the minds they find themselves in, and that's all. I tell people I'm doing an evolutionary theory of religion, and it's like a reflex. They say, oh yes, evolutionary theory of religion. Well, you know, every human group that's ever been studied has religion, so it must be doing us some good. What's it for? What do you think religion is for? It must be for something, because every society has them. And I say, yeah, and every society that's ever been studied also has the common cold. What's that for? The common cold exists for itself. It exists because it can. And the same is true of the superstitions that are the ancestors of folk religion, of organized religion. They're what I call folk religion. So, how are spoken words and folk songs like squirrels, rats, pigeons, and barn swallows? What do those species all have in common? They're not domesticated, but they are evolved to live in close proximity with human beings. They are elegantly evolved to inhabit the same ecological niche with us, but we haven't domesticated them. We don't own them. We don't take care of them. They're wild, but they're a very interesting subset of wild species that have evolved to live with us. The same thing is true of spoken words. They don't require stewards. They don't require guardians. They have plenty of them. We have grammar scolds and language usage mavens. You know, there's William Safire and all these people that are always telling us what we ought to say and what we ought not to say. But in fact, such people are strictly unnecessary. Languages can get along very well without them. They will survive just fine. They've survived for thousands of years. All the other languages that are still going strong, most of them don't have any language scolds. Now, it's interesting. You see, written language is different. Written language has to be taught. You have to go to school. You do have to have guardians. Many cultural items require stewardship. Many don't. Folk songs, you can't get them out of your head. Calculus isn't like that. or maybe here at Caltech, I don't know. It just might be Caltech's different. But in general, some of our cultural products have to be very assiduously tended to, and fostered, and preserved, and protected, transmitted through the ages. Those are the domesticated memes. The wild memes are the ones like fashions and folk songs and spoken words that just evolve without anybody trying to evolve them. Then, of course, there's every sort of intermediate case. Now, how clever it was of sheep to acquire shepherds. Look what they got for this. They got to outsource all their problems: protection from predators, food finding, health maintenance. And all of this at a rather small cost, some loss of free mating. It's been a tremendous bargain for those sheep. By the way, domesticated animals have smaller brains than their wild relatives. Even normalizing for the animals that have been raised for meat, and so they tend to have heavy bodies. No, use it or lose it is a motto that really applies in evolution. And if you don't need your brain, it goes. And they don't need their brain because they've got stewards. They've got people that are their guardians who are taking care of them. So they can get stupid and fat. So the sheep weren't clever, of course, but it was a very clever move. The nearest wild relatives of the sheep you could probably carry off in a few arcs. But the sheep, there's, I don't know, hundreds of millions of sheep in the world today. It's a huge fitness boost if that's what you care about. The cleverness is not the sheep's cleverness, but it's the cleverness of natural selection itself. This is Leslie Orgul's second rule, quip made by Francis Crick some years ago. Evolution is cleverer than you are. Now, what he meant by this, of course, is not intelligent design, not Francis Crick. And in fact, I think if you want to understand what is illusory, what is, quite frankly, a hoax in intelligent design, if you just understand Orgul's second rule, you can see what's wrong with intelligent design. What Orgul's second rule tells you is that although the process of natural selection has no foresight, no purpose, no intelligence, the products of evolution are brilliant. They are incredibly ingenious. You can reverse engineer them and be staggered with awe at how incredibly ingenious and clever and devious these designs are. But it's not the purposeful intelligence of anybody. Something similar happened to the wild memes of religion. They got themselves domesticated. They acquired stewards who were prepared to devote their lives to their flourishing. But, you know, there's a quid pro quo. Many features of that dairy cow are not so much for the benefit of the cow as for the benefit of the dairy herder. That's the price of domestication. So that when we look at religious memes, at the memes of organized religion, the domesticated memes, we should be on the lookout for rather different selection pressures to have been operating than in the wild days. I got you as far as a bunch of God memes or supernatural entity memes in the wild religion, but now we have to start thinking about the uses of domesticated God memes. One of them that, again, this is speculation, but it's guided by facts and it's subject to confirmation. We can design inquiries and investigations and experiments which can shed light on whether it's true or not. One idea which I've loved for years comes from Julian Jaynes' remarkable, eccentric but brilliant book, The Origins of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. He suggests, that book has about 100 really good ideas and about 1,000 bad ones, but this is one I think of the good ones. He suggests that when cities began to get large, when people began to live in larger groups, decision-making became really onerous and difficult. People just didn't know how to make up their minds. And it was harder than it had ever been before. And so they ended up, sort of in desperation, looking for what he called exopsychic means of decision-making, like flipping a coin, like consulting tea leaves, like throwing the I Ching, like sacrificing animals and looking at their entrails, burning virgins and seeing which way the smoke blows, you know. In fact, there are hundreds of different techniques that evolved back in those days for flipping a coin. A particularly useful one was basically to consult the gods, because that was useful for many reasons. First of all, it got you off the hook. If the decision you made was wrong, well, don't blame me, you know. I'm just the messenger. I got the idea from the God, who can never, of course, contradict you. Nice thing about the idea is that a practice like that can spread without anybody understanding the rationale for it. They don't have to understand the rationale, any more than the sheep have to understand the rationale for domesticating themselves. It's a good idea, but they don't have to recognize it. Same thing is true of these. One of my favorite hypotheses for further exploration is McLennan's hypothesis that shamanic healing rituals, which were very widespread and culturally transmitted, led to the convergent evolution, convergent social evolution. Again and again and again, the shamanic healers discovered, reinvented, and refined basically techniques of hypnotic induction. That what the rituals of shamanic healing are hypnotic induction rituals, and hypnosis has genuine medical benefits. There's many things, particularly for analgesia and for the relief of many psychosomatic or partly psychological conditions. Won't do you much good for a broken leg. But hypnosis has some genuine medical applications where it works well. And back in those days, before there was any other kind of medicine, if you were not susceptible to hypnosis, you didn't have any health insurance. There could be quite a strong selection pressure based on susceptibility to hypnosis. And that could then create a bounce in the genes so that you have a cultural genetic coevolution for susceptibility to hypnotic induction. Now we know, we've confirmed really a similar story already with regard to lactose tolerance in adulthood. Those of us, there are probably a few people here who are not lactose tolerant as adults. Are there any lactose intolerant people here? Yes, you're normal for a mammal. Mammals in general are not capable of digesting milk after they're weaned. We're the only mammals really that can. It's abnormal for mammals but normal for human beings, and it is a genetic change in most of us which can be traced back to those lineages of our ancestors who kept dairy herds and who drank the milk raw rather than fermenting it or turning it into something like cheese. That's pretty well established by Luca Cavalli-Sforza and his colleagues. Then, of course, one that everybody knows is the surrogate police. I like to tell the story about the little town in Maine where I have my farm, and you approach it, and there's a sign on the edge of town that says, you know, welcome to Brooksville, your speed is radar controlled. Somebody says to the chairman of the board of selectmen, he says, that must have been pretty expensive. He says, no, it costs about $5. You just get a piece of plywood and some paint. These are among the uses of domesticated God memes. So the claim in the book is that organized religions descended from folk religions. When we became conscious, deliberate stewards, this changed everything. Now, a technical term in my earlier work, which I now harness for pretty heavy lifting in this book, is the idea of a free-floating rationale. This is the reason something happens where the agents in particular don't have to understand it. One of the most vivid and moving cases is actually the cuckoo chick. When cuckoos, you know, they're parasites. The cuckoos do not make their own nests. The mother cuckoo, the female, when she's ready to lay her eggs, she finds a host nest of another species and waits for the female to lay the eggs in that nest. Then when the parents are off getting more twigs or feeding or something, she darts down, lays her egg in the host nest, and then very often she'll push one of the other eggs out. That's just in case the hosts can count. And then she flies away, never returns, never has anything more to do with her egg. The cuckoos tend to hatch quicker than other birds, not surprisingly. And the first thing that baby cuckoo does, it can't see, it's featherless, it's this scrawny little fledgling. When it gets out of the egg, the first thing it does is this: it wrestles around the other eggs and tries to push them out of the nest. And if you've ever seen the video of it, it's absolutely blood-curdling to watch this eggicide happening. Yeah. I don't know what you, ovicide? I don't know. Now, you know, that sweet little cuckoo chick, it doesn't understand what it's doing. It doesn't have to understand the rationale. The rationale is there. We all know why it's happening. We know what the reason is for this, but it's not a reason that the cuckoo has to understand or appreciate. It doesn't have to represent that reason. It just has to have enough control in it so that it accomplishes this task for whatever reason it doesn't have to know. That's what I call a free-floating rationale. And of course, in the case of Dicrocelium dendriticum, we had another nice example of that, because the Dicrocelium dendriticum, it doesn't understand what it's doing when it crawls into that ant's brain. It's, I would say, has an IQ approximately that of a carrot, you know. It doesn't need to think it out. It just has to be designed to be the beneficiary. In organized religion, though, things start to change, because now the question of who benefits falls under the tracking of an entirely different set of processes, because now we get a shift from free-floating rationales to represented rationales. Represented where? In the minds of particular human beings, in the minds of the domesticators, in the minds of the priests and the rabbis and the imams and the religious leaders of all kinds. They start tinkering. They become mimetic engineers and re-engineers. They become like the methodical breeders of animals and plants. And now a whole new set of selection pressures arises. The rationales of the stewards are responsive to other goals that evolution by natural selection without human stewards are not responsive to. And that does change everything. I'm going to give you just a few examples of the adaptations of organized religion that you don't find in wild religions, in folk religions, and that play a big role in the elegance of design of contemporary religion. And perhaps the most central and important is what I call belief in belief. Now, some people believe in God. Many people believe in God. Some people believe in belief in God. They're different. If you believe in belief in God, it's because you think belief in God is a really good thing. Gee, I wish everybody did. I wish more people did. Belief in God is a wonderful thing. That's what it is to believe in belief in God. Now, that's different, right, from believing in God. Now, interestingly enough, more people believe in belief in God than believe in God. How do I know that? Well, think about it. With very few exceptions, if you believe in God, you also believe in belief in God. There may be a few people who deeply regret their belief in God. You know? Just, gosh, I wish I didn't believe in God. I wish nobody did. You know? Can't get this darn belief out of me. There probably are a few. I'm sure there are a few. But in general, they're rare. Most people who believe in God also believe in God. They think it's just wonderful. But then there's all the people who've lost their faith or never had it in the first place, but who nevertheless, for one reason or another, believe in the belief in God. They think it's really, really important. They hope they can recover their belief in God. They try to spread belief in God. So now the question is, how many more? And here, it's almost impossible to say. Why? Because in organized religion, unlike folk religions, every major organized religion has managed to evolve its creeds and its behaviors in such a way that there's almost nothing you could do that would manifest belief in God as opposed to belief in God. What you do if you believe in God is you say you believe in God. And you tithe, and you go to church, and you pray. That's what you do if you believe in God. So it's become very difficult to say who actually believes in God. Now, sometimes this is just very obvious. How many senators and congressmen do you think really believe in God? They all say they do. They all do whatever they can to make sure that you think that they believe in God. But come on, we know better. Now, there's another case where the switch of platforms hurts us. Doggone it. Well, that's not quite right. This formula. I don't know what it means, but I believe it's true. Michael's laptop doesn't have the same font or something. This is actually a sentence in Turkish. Or it was before Michael's laptop scrambled it a little bit. And it really doesn't make any difference. See, here's what I did. I asked a trusted Turkish colleague to give me a true sentence of Turkish and not tell me what it meant. So he did, and I trust him. And I'll bet $1,000 it's a true sentence of Turkish. And I have no idea what it means. I know nothing about what topic it's on. All I know is it's true. So I don't believe it. I just believe that the formula, whatever it is, expresses the truth. There's nothing mysterious about being in that circumstance. I've just explained how easy it is to get yourself into that circumstance if you want to. Sometimes you get into that circumstance, not because you want to, but because you can't do better. Now let's look at another sentence. E equals mc squared. How many of you believe it? Yeah, right. How many of you really understand it? You know, I do pretty well. I know how to do the algebraic manipulations. But I dare say a physicist here could write a little multiple choice exam for me, a devious, devilish multiple choice exam, which I would betray my incomprehension of some of the fine points of this. That's what good multiple choice exams can do. So I semi-understand this. But I believe it's true. Now, what a wonderful thing language permits us to do. It permits us to have a division of labor, or rather, you can put it sort of comically by saying, leave the believing to us lay people and leave the understanding to the scientists. Which isn't quite right, because we don't so much believe as just believe that the proposition is true, whatever it is. Our belief in two is more like our belief in one than we might like to admit sometimes. But that's okay. Even within science, it's quite possible for scientists to use a formula every day in their work and not really be in full control of what it means. There's people down the hall that know what it believes. They don't have to. That is a legitimate and acceptable division of labor. By the way, I had a funny experience. I gave a version of this talk just a week ago, a little bit more than a week ago, at Fermilab outside Chicago. In a room with about this large, 500 of the world's great physicists. And I put up E equals mc squared and say, how many of you believe this? How many of you understand it? All the hands go up. But I had the last laugh because one of the physicists present raised his hand and he said, the experimentalists think they understand it, but they don't. Only the theoreticians really understand it. Making my point. But the point is that in religion, this doesn't work. Because with religious formula, even the experts claim not to understand. They make even something of a celebration of this. Now, here's a phrase that one often sees. You know, we're not atheists. We all believe in God in our own ways. This is an extremely popular idea. 98% of Americans believe in God. But what does that really mean? Lucy thinks rock is to die for. Desi thinks rock is to die for. Lucy's thinking of rock Hudson. Desi's thinking of rock music. They don't really agree on much of anything here, do they? And the same thing is true about believing in God. The term God has so many different meanings that to claim, well, well, you know, we're not atheists. It doesn't really mean a thing. Why do people cling to this fantasy? We almost all believe in God. Why is there so much fostering guilt for disbelief? Because this is a very elegant adaptation of organized religions. It spreads very well. The religions that don't have this feature don't spread as well as the ones that do. Nobody had to invent it, but it plays a huge role in fostering, in keeping robust the various religious creeds around the world. And here's the one that really bothers me the most. I found this, I took this picture driving up to my farm in Maine. Good without God becomes zero. Very cute, very clever, nice bumper sticker. Hey, it's subtraction, folks. Yeah. And I think it is the greatest falsehood on the planet. I think if there's one thing I want, I know I am preaching to the choir today, and I'm delighted to be able to do it, but I want to suggest to the choir, my brethren, that you go out and start spreading the counter meme and resisting the presumption that you can't be good without God, that because you've got religion, you're automatically morally superior to everybody else. I think... Thank you. Do not let that presumption pass unchallenged. I think we simply have to remind people that some of their best friends, some of the people they admire the most, some of the people that are most engaged in this world are atheists and agnostics. And the presumption that somehow believing in God makes you a morally better person is an idea that has no basis in fact whatever and should not be accepted without demurral. You don't have to insist that it's false, you just have to insist that nobody knows that. That is not an assumption that you are entitled to in any reasonable discussion. Now, finally, I just want to end with a few other points. Religions are powerful forces in people's lives, and as I said at the outset, they're brilliantly designed. When we understand their design, we can see better what we might do or should do to revise their design to improve them. And in the meantime, what should we do? Since I'm saying that we haven't done the science properly yet, we don't really know enough about it, I would be contradicting myself if I now listed a whole bunch of policy proposals and said this is what we have to do, because policy's got to depend on getting a better, clearer sense of what religions are. But there's one policy proposal that I do put forward in my book, and I'm deadly serious about it, and I want to spread it as widely as I can. And it's this: we should have more education on world religion in the schools. For all children, in public and private schools and in homeschooling, we should have a national curriculum on world religions. Now, history, creed, ritual, music, symbols, ethical commands, and prohibitions. All of it. And how are we going to produce this curriculum? In collaboration with representatives of the various religious groups, to be sure. They get to say what they want to be in the curriculum, but we get to look closely and make sure that it included is anything that is manifestly true, historical fact, that they might wish weren't true or they might wish not to have known. But we're going to allow them to put whatever great things their religions have done, fine. They can't just do that. They've got to include the bad things too. This is going to be factual, not evaluative. It's not going to be proselytizing. It's going to be just facts. Now look, we already do this. We say, you've got to teach your kid reading, writing, arithmetic, American history. And I think we should also say, and you've got to teach them this curriculum in world religions. As long as you teach them that, you can teach them anything else you want. I'm going to be really libertarian about this. You can indoctrinate your children with any religious doctrines you want as long as you also give them this. Now, it's interesting that this proposal has been described in one review, San Diego Roman Catholic newspaper, as totalitarian. And in another review was described as hilarious. I submit it is such a clear, no-brainer extension of principles that we all claim to know and love. Informed consent. Democracy depends on informed consent. Misinformed consent or ignorant consent is not worth a coin flip. Now, parents are not owners of their children. They are stewards of their children. They have a responsibility to the rest of us. They can't keep their children in prison. They can't lock their children in dark rooms. That's child abuse. I submit that enforced ignorance of these straightforward facts agreed to by everybody, that enforced ignorance is a form of child abuse. Thank you. Now, you know and I know that there are going to be a lot of people that just hate this idea. Just very patiently ask them to tell you why. What is wrong with this? What is wrong with this? I don't think they have a non-embarrassing answer to that question. I think the only answer they can give you is, we reserve the right to keep our children ignorant until we have so indoctrinated them that they will be unable to see these facts for what they are. If they have any other justification, I'd like to hear it. I'm quite prepared to listen, but I haven't heard anything good yet. Thank you very much for your attention.
And then we're going to do the book signing, and then after that, we're going over to Burger Continental, which is a restaurant on Lake just north of California, west of here, where we are at. So Dan will be there. We will be solving the great questions over adult beverages. The best way to do this, and so if the line is too long, get your book signed, or you want to ask another question, we can do it there. Dan, go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to try to keep my answers short. Please keep your questions short because I think it's probably pretty hot and sticky in here right now.
Okay, let's talk about world religions. Buddhism, Taoism, Shinto, Confucianism. They don't believe in God.
Yeah.
They don't even believe in beliefs. So this seems to be very powerful counterexamples of what you just said today. What is your definition of religion then?
Yeah, good.
Is belief really all that important, or is something else more important? Because what is important for these religions is to be practice, doing something, believing in something.
In the could people hear that? He points out that Eastern religions tend not to have either belief in belief or belief, in some cases, belief in God. Or they don't have a notion of faith, for instance. And I think that in the early going, I give a definition of religion, a tentative one, and say, look, it doesn't matter too much exactly how I draw the line, because I'm going to be looking both sides of the line in any case. But for me, for my definition of religion, religion involves a social institution where the adherents profess or avow belief in a supernatural agent or agents whose approval is to be sought. Now, there are things which look very much like religions that don't meet that criterion. And I think that's your point is well taken. In a sense, they're like religions, but they're not quite religions. And they do fall under the phenomena that we have to look closely at. But I'd also say that those Eastern religions, which I don't know all that much about, but I have been able to determine that, in effect, every major religion has its Unitarians. There are sophisticated Buddhists and sophisticated Shinto and sophisticated Sikhs and Jain and so forth that, in a sense, don't believe in God. But every man, the unsophisticated believers do. They have a whole panoplies of deities and supernatural agencies that they pray to, that they make sacrifices to. But the point is, it's a good point. Yeah.
We are animals who have evolved enough intelligence to have a great deal of difficulty accepting death. And with that comes the imperative for afterlife, which gives rise to not only religion, but a lot of pseudoscience and so forth and so on. And I think this is linked to the gentleman's question as well, or his point, in that many religions that don't believe in God or believe in God do have some
believe in the afterlife, yes.
In the afterlife or
Yeah.
generation of some kind.
You're right, and I talk about it in the book. Yeah, So, what question?
Suppose someone claimed they believe in God, but you suspected no, they believed in belief in God.
Yeah.
What kind of questions would you ask them to ascertain the difference?
Well, some people, how would I go about testing somebody who claimed to believe in God when I suspected they just believed in belief in God? I discussed that at some length in the book, and in fact, it's a pretty tricky thing. If you do questionnaires with subtly different questions, you can sometimes bring this out. There's some interesting work on questionnaires that's been done. I've been doing some with my graduate students and postdocs. Our results are not yet sufficiently clear to publish. There's all sorts of fairly devious ways you can get at this, actually. Yes?
Is there a physical place in the brain, a chain of molecules that can be pointed to as the source of God?
Is there a place in the brain for God? Well, you know, first of all, a few years ago, Dean Hamer wrote a book called The God Gene. And I discuss it briefly in the book because although I think that book was sort of very simplistic and sort of sensationalistic, he's probably onto something. And it's not so much a place in the brain as a neuromodulator imbalance or balance, which the sort of relative concentration of this, for which there is genetic variation in the human beings, may indeed be, for instance, the sort of thing that would evolve in response to the hypnotizability issue. But first of all, as a materialist, as somebody who spends most of his time working on how the mind sits in the brain, yes, there's a place. If we put you in the scanner and asked you to think about Jesus, yes, there'd be a place that lights up. There's also be a place that would light up for jet ski, and Jew, and Jeremiah, and everything else. And they wouldn't be all in alphabetical order either. That's no news. The question is whether there's, as it were, dedicated machinery for deities. I don't think there's any evidence yet that there is, but I think that a more subtle and complicated story about brain differences will soon be. But it's way too early for that. We've got to figure out how you can think about the corner drugstore and hamburgers and the road to Paris before we worry about how you can think about God. Right now, using scanners to study religion is a little bit like trying to figure out how a chess-playing computer works by using a voltmeter. I think that'll be the last question, okay? Thanks. Thank you.